So thank you for tolerating that. But I think Larry sort of set the stage in terms of why he thinks this is a film noir. And so now that you all have seen the film, I want to sort of throw it to him to talk about, expand on that a little bit.
No, I already said everything I had to say.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so that, I have other things to say, but that was all I had to say about noir.
It is not everything you have to say. I've been around you long enough to know that.
Shall we start with our argument?
Yeah, oh, sure, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, so my argument on this is just that this is a good film, and I would encourage people, if you watched it once and you're a little taken aback, rent it on Amazon Prime or whatever, however you stream, and watch it again. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it the second time around. But I just, it's hard for me to put this in the same league with Goodfellas or Wolf of Wall Street in terms of Scorsese's output overall.
Raging Bull.
And Raging Bull as well. But to me, this lacks, there's a narrative propulsion, in particular to Goodfellas, that just keeps you going the whole time. And it just carries you through to the end. That this one feels it wanders a little bit in the middle for me, and you sort of wonder where it's going and what it's doing, especially when it's on the cliff and in the cave and so forth. So I want Larry to make the case of why this is among Scorsese's 3 best films in his estimation, and the other 2 are not Goodfellas and Wolf of Wall Street or Raging Bull.
No, they're Hugo and Kundun. And the 4th one is A Journey Through American Cinema, which is his 2-part astonishing documentary about all of the overlooked and interesting side streets of American cinema. It's absolutely essential watching. My difficulty with Goodfellas and Raging Bull and Wolf and many other things that he's made, and this doesn't mean they're not extremely well made, is that they are quite heartless. I have visited enough reptile houses at enough zoos that watching snakes kill each other, strangle each other, slither around, has a limited fascination for me. And he is an extremely gifted filmmaker, and he's better when he has a really good writer. I'm a big fan of The Age of Innocence also, which was written by Jay Cox, who's a good writer. But to me, this movie has a heart that the other kinds of films lack, that makes me not even so much root for Leonardo DiCaprio's character, but simply want to know what is inside his head. And I already know in 10 minutes what's inside the heads of Joe Pesci, Ray Liotta, and Robert De Niro in Goodfellas. There is almost no complexity to those characters at all. This is a tremendously complex character, partly because the reality of the film, which we see through his eyes, is always questionable. I'm going to wander for just a second, but the first time I watched it, I thought, boy, look at the green screen effects in this thing are terrible. I mean, they're on a boat, and I can tell that's not an actual background. And when he's riding with Ted Levine, the warden in the Jeep, I was sitting at home thinking, the second time I watched it, oh, come on, guys, can you not do better than that? And then reading about the film, Scorsese said that was intentional, and that he wanted us to notice the artificiality and unreality of it in order to realize that these things could be happening either only in the mind of the main character or seen through the perverted lens of the eyes of the main character, whose ability to relay things to us can never be trusted. We don't know if he sees and hears them. We don't know if they're real to him. We don't know if they're real, period. And that the artificiality of the filmmaking in spots is meant to underline that. And then I thought the crummy green screen effects were great.
So it's basically paralleling the artifice of the story that Ben Kingsley's character has created around whatever the fake story is for Teddy.
Exactly, and the reason we were talking about, I also didn't get everything out of it the first time, but I paid at that point to go back into a theater to watch it a second time a week later. And if you don't realize how hard it was to get film critics who see everything
I was
for
gonna
free
say.
to unload $10, man, it's like pulling teeth. But I went
Wasn't
back.
really one of it.
I just was amazed. I was amazed at myself. And I began to see things that I had not understood. That my first time I saw this, I thought, why is Rachel Solando barefoot, and what difference could it possibly make whether she has shoes or not? And the answer is his wife was barefoot when she killed his children. And I realized that the second time that shoes were important. Things like in the very first scene, the boat comes out of a fog. And that is Scorsese's way of saying the entire film will be a fog through which you will peer at events, and only eventually will the fog lift and explain to you what has happened. Can I take a minute to say this is a really good novel by Dennis Lehane that this is based on. I'm a fan of Lehane, but the ending is different.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that.
The ending of the Lehane novel, Teddy says to Chuck, well, we got to start investigating this place again, Chuck. I don't think we found the truth yet. And Chuck sort of has oh shoot, well, so the whole thing was just a waste, darn it. I'm just using Chuck because I can't remember the doctor's real name. And by the way, his name as a character is a clue, Chuck All, because Teddy has chucked out all of his reality. That's why that character's named Chuck All, A-U-L-E. No reason for it to be named that. The ending of the movie, he says to him, is it better to live as a monster or die as a good man? And you know he knows what the reality is. And he willingly goes off to be lobotomized. In the book, you have no idea, it's completely ambiguous, whether he has retained his sanity or just gone back to this delusional idea that he's still a marshal and still investigating. And he leaves, and the last shot of the book, so to speak, the last moment, is the doctor just staring at him like, I wonder what's going on in his head. And the woman who wrote this screenplay, Lita Kalogridis, who by the way is a Davidson College grad, did want people to know that he knew. And so she changed the last little moment of it.
So I know you talked to her when the film came out and interviewed her. How much of is the Lehane novel? I feel like aspects of the script are supernatural in nature. There is certainly an aura of the supernatural that pervades the film, and you're constantly questioning what is real and what is not. Is that true in the novel? Because I think of Lehane as very much kind of a realist crime writer.
Well, because in this film, we're seeing, the novel is told more from a third person point of view. Teddy did this and Chuck did that. So the elements of the supernatural are clearly seen when you're reading it to be in Teddy's head.
Okay.
In the movie, you're not really sure. I mean, is Latus really there? Is he talking to him?
Yeah.
You don't know these things. And the fact that he sort of seems like a ghost, in the book those things are clearer, or at least more bluntly made obvious. And she said she wanted to leave as much in the fog, so to speak, as possible. I did talk to her. Her main claim to fame is she worked for 8 years to help James Cameron get Avatar finished. That you may judge your opinion of her based on whether that was worth 8 years of anyone's life. But I wasn't sure it was worth 3 hours of mine. But she made a very interesting point, which is this. Women in Hollywood almost never get to write or direct action or violence or adventure. She said, and this is 14 years ago when the film came out, she said there are only 2 women in Hollywood who regularly are employed to do this. Catherine Bigelow.
James Cameron's ex-wife.
James Cameron's ex-wife. Yes, apparently you have to know James Cameron to do this. And me. And she said, and I know that's going to change. Well, here we are in 2024, and I think those are still the only 2 women who are doing this. And she felt that I'm going to break through and show that an intelligent woman can script semi-thriller with violence, and she did, but it didn't move the needle at all in Hollywood. By the way, in case any of you have kids or grandkids who want to be English majors, and you say to them, oh, what are you going to do with an English degree? The answer is this, because Kalogridis has a degree in English from Davidson, and her specialty was Jacobean and Elizabethan playwrights. And she said, my parents just kept saying over and over, get a real degree. Well, whether or not that's a real degree, she has a real job. So she was able to go back and tell them she could do something with it that would pay the bills.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great. And having come from a college graduation today, I can tell you they had all the different graduates stand up, and the humanities are dying. It's not a myth.
As an English major myself, that makes me sad, but I believe it's true. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so let's also, Larry, if you don't mind, situate this film in kind of the sweep of Scorsese's career. Where is he? What comes before? What does he go and do after?
Well, you know, he has always pursued sort of two tracks. There's the I'm in my New York City element track, which is not just Mean Streets, and Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and I have to tell the Raging Bull story real fast. When Raging Bull was released, Jake LaMotta went around the United States doing interviews, and he came to Charlotte, and I found out that his second to last fight had been in Charlotte when he was a boxer, and he had knocked out some bum in 6 rounds. And so when I asked him about that, the whole interview got much better and more friendly and easygoing. And after a while, he started going on and on about the mob and throwing fights, and the handler who was with him kept saying, well, Jake, I think we have to go. And Jake, I don't know, he doesn't want to know about that. And I was like, no, I would want to know about throwing fights for the mob. Why would I want to know that? And Jake kept saying, it's all right, what are they going to do now? Whack me. And the whole interview got way, way better. He said Robert De Niro was too good looking, probably the only time that's actually ever been said. Robert De Niro on screen. But there's all those New York movies, and The Age of Innocence is that too. It's New York's essence, and Gangs of New York, which is where he first worked with DiCaprio.
Wolf of Wall Street.
And Wolf of Wall Street. And then there's these other things that seem to me to be more a bee he gets in his bonnet, like The Silence, or this, or Hugo, or Kundun. Why would he want to make a movie about the Dalai Lama? Like the most violent thing is somebody raises his voice. And the answer is, according to an interview I read with him once, he does one for his sort of roots, and then one that takes him into a place where he's a little bit afraid or doesn't know exactly what he's doing and may make mistakes, and takes it out of that line. And so this is in the taking a chance line. I'll just say this, Tim and I were talking about this in the lobby. This is the second highest grossing film he's ever made.
Really?
Worldwide. It made $280 million, roughly. Well ahead of all but one film, and I'll take answers. What do you think the highest grossing international worldwide film for Martin Scorsese is?
What's that?
It's Wolf of Wall Street.
Correct.
Correct. And I confess I guessed
And-
Color of Money, but.
And I would not have, speaking of a movie that's a passion project outside of his New York roots, I would not have guessed that. But this just captured people's imaginations internationally, and I think in Wolf of Wall Street, people who saw it overseas just figured that's how Americans all act.
That's how Americans act, yeah.
Like, okay, they're drunk all the time, and they smash up cars, and they chase women. That probably reaffirms some stereotypes.
Piles of cocaine and.
That's it, just
Helpless
if they can get it. But I think to me, he does more interesting work almost when he steps out We're going to do Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven later in this series. And I think Unforgiven is his greatest film. But I also think he sometimes does more interesting work when he tries to get away from Westerns and the iconic solo writer who comes out of nowhere. To me, directors interest me more when they step apart from the things we value them for the most.
So I want to, we're creeping up on 10 o'clock here. I know people need to hit bedtime. So I really want to kind of throw this to the audience as well. And you all have questions for Larry or comments on the film, or anybody want to lobby for Goodfellas being better than that?
Oh, you did that already. Stop it. If any of you wants to say that his best film is The Departed, we'll wrestle outside. Go ahead.
Yeah, right here.
I don't think it's his best, but it's probably his most underrated, I think. And I think one reason it's very overlooked is because Inception came out the same year in 2010, and that was the other Leo-led film. And while this did really well at the box office, Inception did like 4 times as much, which is interesting. And then I just want to say a couple things I noticed. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time I've seen it, but he knows where the note is under the bed because it's his room. And also with regards to the shoes, when he pulls the shoes out of the closet, it's 2 pairs of men's shoes. So it would never be Rachel's shoes. And then there was one thing too, when the woman writes on the note, when she writes run,
Right.
she grabs the drink of water and then she goes to drink and then the glass isn't there. Yeah. And so that's another one of those kind of like visual cues or tricks.
And the first time I saw it, I thought that was just a gaffe.
Yeah.
But then I read later that, yeah, you're supposed to see that and think he's going, where am I? What's happened to this reality? I have to say this or I'll run out of time. I don't want to miss it, but anagrams are so important to this. And I did not realize until I read it, you all may be ahead of me on this, that the title of the book and film is an anagram. It changes, move the letters around, and it becomes truths and lies. And that's why this island, which has no reason to be called Shutter Island, what does that even mean, is called...
Is it even an island?
Does it even exist? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be a mental hospital in Massachusetts.
Well, and in fact, it was shot at an abandoned actual mental hospital. That was a real mental hospital. But it may not be an island, which would also explain why when they're coming on the, I'll use air quotes, boat, there's bad green screen. So it may be that they woke Teddy up and told him, you got off the boat there, Marshall.
I actually like that a lot because with the other 2 things that I trip on are how he scales that, climbs down that cliff without dying and finds the cave. And then when he jumps in the supposedly freezing cold water and swims, across the inlet to get to the lighthouse at the end, but somehow it doesn't have hypothermia. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's
that
actually...
was our problem with the Revenant. Screen slash, what was his name, Albert, who did all the matte paintings for Hitchcock?
Yeah, I'm blanking because the matte painting guy that I know is Harrison Ellenshaw, who I don't think worked with Hitchcock.
No, wasn't he?
He was more at Disney.
Yeah. No, this guy worked with Universal and with with Hitchcock.
A regular guy.
Yeah. No. He did matte paintings, so that all of the surroundings around the lighthouse, let's say, the mountains and all that, was all painted.
Right.
And the only thing that was real could be the light. That could be a real lighthouse somewhere.
Right.
But everything else surrounding it was artificial.
Yeah.
Today you do it with graphics. In the past, you had the painting in front of the lens of the camera, giving you the forced perspective.
Well, Robert Richardson, who shot this, apparently kind of fought Scorsese because he's a great cinematographer. He has 3 Oscars. He also shot Aviator and some other films for Scorsese. And said, oh, come on, man, people are going to think I don't know my job. They're going to think, well, I thought this guy was a really good cinematographer, but man, I could do that in my basement. And Scorsese said, no, they'll know it's not you. I want people to be jolted. I want them to go, why does this look so not real? And Richardson finally said, okay, and gave in. But He was not interested in having this faux painting look until Scorsese told him why he thought it was necessary.
I want to shout out the other thing about Leo. He gets to reuse the Boston accent from The Departed. He doesn't have to unlearn it in this film. So.
You know what? Hang on, Mike, I'll be right with you. DiCaprio has made 7 films now with Scorsese, counting his short. And he's third only to Robert De Niro, who has made 10, and Scorsese's mother, who has had cameos in 9. But he's planning his next 2 films with DiCaprio. And one of them is about a shipwreck in the 18th century, speaking of Revenant. I suspect there may be some people eating there. And the other is a biography of Theodore Roosevelt with DiCaprio as Teddy. A different Teddy, not this Teddy. Or I thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt, but Theodore Roosevelt. And he apparently, if you know, DiCaprio is going to be 50 in November. Scorsese will be 82 this fall. And if he continues to work as long as Woody Allen and Clint Eastwood, he could make 5 more films with DiCaprio. That could be his all-time muse. You had a question or comment?
A question about if you live your life, you can't go back and relive it. Why is it that you or some other people here, I know some of them, really want to see a movie twice? Because that's not the way you live life. You live life once, you see a movie once, and you have an impression of the movie, and that should be it.
He's calling into question the whole...
The use of your time.
Yeah, the use of my time. This is tough.
Well, I mean, we could make a case, why should you eat at the same restaurant more than once? You've tasted the food.
It always tastes differently. No, you cannot, it is not the same scenery.
But that's my point about this film and about the others in this series, I hope. It's not the same. The plot is the same, guaranteed. But his noticing about the shoes and my noticing about the elements of the fog, those are different. You know, I was in New York recently, and I went and stood in front of the Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, or Van Gogh, as my Dutch brother-in-law would say. Van Gogh, actually. Well, I've seen that painting 10 times. Why do I need to see it again? Not just because it's pretty, which in a sad way it is, but because I look at it and I think, that's how he put the paint on. That's really cool. Or, I hadn't understood that that sun is multiple colors. It's not just yellow. So revisiting a movie for me is not about the story, because you're right. I already know that Teddy's sadly insane and becomes sane and doesn't want to be. But I don't feel like I've seen everything there is to see. I'll tell you, he mentioned Inception, and a film that I think is amazing. And I interviewed Christopher Nolan. And Nolan said, I make my movies visually so dense that you cannot possibly see everything in them the first time. Even simpler ones like Insomnia. If you watch it again, you'll see things in the background. You'll understand better that someone is dressed a certain way, and the picture, even if you know the narrative, will be a different experience on some level. And I guess that's why I would rewatch something.
I would just also say, and Nolan's great for this because the sound mix is always so muddy and so hard to understand what people are saying. So I went back and watched Oppenheimer with the captions on. When I saw
heck, me too, man.
Got a lot more out of it. But these are rich texts, I think, is the argument. And I honestly, I try to reread Anna Karenina every 10 years, which makes me a total geek. But honestly, like, you get to something at a certain stage in your life, and then you read it again, you know, maybe in your 20s, and you read the great novel again in your 30s when you're married, and then in your 40s when you have kids who are growing older. And I feel the same way about these films. Zodiac is one that we're going to screen 4 weeks from now that just, it so greatly rewards multiple viewings and in terms of Fincher's attention to detail. And so I'll sort of do a little ad for that coming up.
Albert Whitlock was the painter.
Oh, you're right. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so I have a question. So
Yeah.
it was the entrance to Auschwitz, right? And it was Doc House.
Doc
It
Howe.
was Dachau, I think.
Doc Howe.
That was not the entrance to Auschwitz.
No,
It was a different.
the Americans
It was
did
just a
not
different
liberate
concentration.
I could have sworn, but okay.
Anything else? He already did my ad for Zodiac about it. If you like John Carroll Lynch in this movie, if you like Mark Ruffalo in this movie, come back and see Zodiac in 4 weeks.
Even if you didn't like them, come back and see Zodiac. Zodiac's a strange, interesting film.
Zodiac's
No,
awesome.
no.
Appreciate it.
Hang on, I have one other thing I wanted to say, and I'll have to get out my cheat sheet because I'm old, so I don't memorize everything anymore. I don't even remember where it is in my pocket anymore. The thing that I wanted to share, which is on the bottom here, is that we do have Robert De Niro to thank or blame for this amazing obsession that Scorsese has with Leonardo DiCaprio. And I wanted to share something that he said. De Niro had worked with DiCaprio when he was very young in This Boy's Life, an interesting film.
The Tobias Wolff book. Adaptation of the Tobias Wolff.
Yes, exactly, and a good one. So many years later, when Scorsese was making Gangs of New York, De Niro went to him and said, hey, you know, I worked with a kid, and you should work with this kid. That's all he said, nothing else, very casual. And Scorsese said, it was casual, but it wasn't, because with him, a recommendation at that time in the early 90s is not casual. He didn't give them. So the years go by, and I presented with Leo in Gangs of New York, and they worked together. And he made Gangs possible. He loved the pictures I'd made. He wanted to explore the same territory. And so we developed a relationship. And towards the end of The Aviator, which came along later, there was something happening, a maturity with him, and we clicked. I have found that we have a similar kind of sensibility the way Bob and I did. We have fearlessness, the will to try things, even if we don't know that they'll work, and ultimately a very, very strong trust in each other. We argue, we push each other to different limits. That is a gift. And that's why, if you ever wondered why he makes film after film, not just with the same people, but with DiCaprio in particular, that is why. Scorsese is, you really, if you get a chance, try to find that documentary about American cinema, because he watches everything, he has seen everything, worldwide too, but American especially. And you know, when he made this film, one of the movies I told you about that he showed people, he also showed them Samuel Fuller's Shock Corridor, which is set in an insane asylum. And it's a harrowing, brutal short film that only Sam Fuller would make. And so he has this encyclopedic knowledge of film. And he brought that to this project, and he has sort of instilled that in DiCaprio, who is like a disciple now. And he guides Leo. Every film, Leo comes to him and says, according to the article, what should I watch? What should I think about that when I'm going to work with you? And Scorsese finds in movies and stuff. This may be, to me, a richer partnership than the one with Harvey Keitel or De Niro, because DiCaprio takes him in unusual directions. And De Niro, good as he is, tends to take him in a more familiar direction. So I'm excited about seeing Teddy, I guess, and The Wager, and anything else they want to do together.
So you guys are real ones for sticking to the end here. Larry, do you want to give a quick blurb for Being John Malkovich, which is the next film in the series?
I rewatch all of these before I come and talk, and so I have to rewatch that to really familiarize myself with it. I guess what I would say is that Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman would have got my vote for Oscars for direction and screenplay, rather than the extremely overrated American Beauty. Yes, I said that. Which is a good film, but it's not a great film. And I really think that they were robbed because their film is so unconventional, so strange, and in fact doesn't ever resolve its strangeness. It's just strange all the way. Hollywood doesn't know what to do with movies like that.
That's Charlie Kaufman.
But that's Charlie Kaufman, and I think that's great. It just is amazing. So I'm very excited about that.
So please join us 2 weeks from tonight for Being John Malkovich, and we'll we'll talk to you again then, and thank you all for the questions and for being a great audience. And,
Congratulations.
See you soon.